there's great examples now of people who have went on to do incredible things with type 1. So I think the industry has started to change, right? Where people used to think, gosh, 5-10 years ago, right? Maybe you shouldn't play sports. Maybe you shouldn't go do this because of your diabetes. Now I don't think that's really the mindset anymore, because I mean, shoot, we ran across America. I do Ironman triathlons, and I think 20 years ago that was very, very much more of a rarity. And I think it's the role models out there that are giving that hope and helping with that shift in the industry's mindset of what type 1 diabetes is all about.
That's endurance athlete and the co-founder of the Diabetes Sports Project, Eric Tozer. And this is episode number 2 of the Bravest Podcast. Hey everyone, this is Craig, and you've dialed into episode 2 of the Bravest Podcast. On this episode, we talk with Eric Tozer. Eric is a remarkable person who, while he often gets the spotlight due to his work with his nonprofit, the Diabetes Sports Project, he's a super humble guy and really in it to shine a light on others. Eric is specifically interested in helping other type 1 athletes succeed in their own athletic pursuits. But it goes much deeper than that. He's also focused on how the success of competitive and endurance sports all translates from inspiration into action. And that's because what Eric learned early on is that it's one thing to be inspirational, but it's another to actually help others take the steps necessary to become better versions of themselves despite having a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes. Our conversation goes on a journey from Eric's childhood in Sacramento, California as a competitive soccer player through an NCAA Championship run with his college team. We discuss his sudden loss of 20 pounds and the surprise diagnosis with type 1 diabetes at the age of 22. And since that diagnosis, Eric has run multiple Ironman triathlons and multiple marathons. We also discuss the trials and victories he experienced through a 15-day, 3,000-mile foot race from San Diego straight across the country to New York City with 9 other type 1 runners. You'll learn that his athletic accomplishments are truly admirable, but his work away from competing is even more special. Eric co-founded the Diabetes Sports Project to support type 1 athletes of all ages. His passion for using sport as a tool to lead a healthy and successful life is clear throughout our conversation, and it is truly my pleasure to be able to feature him on this episode of the podcast. So sit back and enjoy this conversation with Eric Tozer. So, Eric Tozer, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with me today. When I was piecing together a list of people I really wanted to interview for the podcast, your name kept popping up for some reason. I've always been inspired by endurance athletes, but especially athletes who happen to be type 1 diabetics in parallel. So then you and I, and I'm not sure if you even realized this, but we actually connected through social media. We connected on Instagram not too long ago, and that's kind of the first time I really started digging into your history a little bit more. And the more I learned about you, the more I realized I really wanted to have you as a guest on the podcast. So I really, really appreciate that. So thank you very much for sitting down and for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I agree. I think endurance athletes of all types have something special about us. And I think if we can share our stories and our accomplishments, especially with type 1, whether it be in the type 1 community or outside of it, and if we can change people's lives and provide some inspiration and that education piece as well, that's what it's all about.
I love it. So I've been doing a lot of research on you, and I have a ton of questions for you. But again, I'll try to be very respectful of your time. But I'd love to take it a little back, a ways back actually, to your childhood. So maybe you could share a little bit about where you grew up, and I'm really interested in understanding what kind of kid you were.
Yeah, well, so I grew up in Sacramento, California. born in 1984 to date myself, but I grew up, I have an older brother and a younger sister, and we grew up playing every sport under the sun, basketball, swimming, baseball, you name it. Through sort of as I narrowed it down into high school, and I narrowed it down essentially just to be playing soccer. That was sort of my first passion and love, and was really fortunate to be able to travel the world playing over to Europe and Central America, and it's just in my mind, it's a beautiful game, and something that I'm still passionate about today, and I don't have as much time to play it as I would like, but that was sort of that was kind of my everything as I was a kid. I was always active, and soccer was sort of my favorite, and it's where my friends were, it's where my networks were, that's how it was a big part of my identity. But I think what I learned through sports, and as I went into college and continued to play, was captain for a couple of years and got to the national championship. And I think what sports and athletics, and I think teamwork, I think what that teaches people, especially kids, is phenomenal. I think, things like teamwork and commitment, and how to win, how to lose with dignity in class, and just the dedication. And I think there's so many amazing qualities and traits that are learned and taught through being part of a team and team sports and sports in general, that I'm a big proponent of it, and attribute a lot of my success sort of on and off the field, whether it be personally or in the workplace, to my sporting career, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to dive into that mindset a little bit more with you too, in a little bit. And you mentioned that you were the captain of your soccer team. You guys actually went to, from what I understand, the Final Four. It was an NCAA Championship. But at that point in time, you were not type 1 diabetic. You weren't born with type 1 diabetes. Maybe you can share a little bit about your story leading up to your diagnosis, and maybe share a little bit about your diagnosis story with us.
Yeah. I went through. I was diagnosed at 23. I'm sorry, 22. And I didn't know really much of anything about it. We had one friend, my older brother's friend, has type 1, so that was, I kind of was around it at swim practice and whatnot, but not enough to really understand it at all. I didn't even know there was two types of diabetes. I think. And they're drastically different, obviously. But so it was actually, I just graduated, and we got to the Final Four. We lost in the national championship game, but first time in school history we got there. And then after I graduated, I went over to Europe for a couple weeks. The World Cup was over in Germany, so I went to just be in Germany and experience that, which was phenomenal. And during those 2 weeks over in Europe, I lost over 20 pounds. I was eating and drinking nonstop. I was completely naive to it. I didn't know that anything was wrong. I kind of chalked it up to being in a different environment. I wasn't training every day. I wasn't sort of in my routine of college sports. And so, I'm sure it was all the European croissants and beers we were drinking that accounted for the weight loss. But I got home and it was, as I stepped off the plane, my mom straight away said, I think you're sick. And so I was due, about a month later, I was supposed to move across the country to start my first job in St. Louis. And we went into the doctor, I think the next day. A1C was, 12 point something, blood sugar through the roof. Pretty classic. I mean, thankfully it didn't progress to the point where I, ended up in the hospital, but I was certainly on my way there. And so my month time span to move across the country was expedited, to a few days, and I wanted to get out to St. Louis as soon as I could to get set up with a diabetes team and start to learn something I knew nothing about, this new disease that I really had to educate myself on from the start. And again, I give a lot of credit in my mindset of type 1 to my sports and my sort of sport background. I think that competitiveness that I've always had came through, and it's still there to this day. And I remember being on the phone, when the doctor called to tell us the news, and I remember hearing my mom cry in the background as she's listening in, but didn't think I knew she was, and in my head it was never a bad thing, in the sense that I thought, okay, well, it's something, it's a disease. What do I need to do so that I can continue to live my life and manage this new thing? And I think some people look at it as what do I need to adjust in my life to make it fit diabetes? And for me, I don't know, I never thought of it like that. I said, I'm going to continue to play soccer. I'm going to continue to live an active life. And what do I need to do with my diabetes management to make that happen? And so it was an interesting first year, because I was living by myself in a new city, a new job, didn't really know anybody, and so really quickly had to educate myself. So
yeah, so it's interesting because when I remember years ago having conversations with other type 1 diabetics, and the mindset that you're demonstrating, this kind of warrior mindset, like let's just figure it out and just kind of move on with life and be better, faster, stronger, seems like it's more commonplace nowadays, doesn't it, than it was just even a few years back? Is that your experience when you're talking with others?
yeah, I think it is and it isn't, right? I think everybody's so unique and individual that there's definitely people who, and I'm very sensitive to this. My wife, she gives me a hard time all the time because I'm pretty positive and optimistic about things. And so I certainly understand that that's not the case for everybody. So I think those are the people that we need to touch. Those are the people that need somebody like me, somebody like, the Diabetes Sports Project athletes to really be there as a role model. And I think the point you make is true. I think people are starting to have a more positive outlook on it, because there's people out there achieving these incredible feats, right? There's great examples now of people who have went on to do incredible things with type 1. So I think the industry has started to change, right? Where people used to think, gosh, 5-10 years ago, right? Maybe you shouldn't play sports. Maybe you shouldn't go do this because of your diabetes. Now I don't think that's really the mindset anymore, because we ran across America. I do Ironman triathlons, and I think 20 years ago that was very, very much more of a rarity. And I think it's the role models out there that are giving that hope and helping with that shift in the industry's mindset of what type 1 diabetes is all about.
No doubt. And I'd like to definitely dive into that with you a little bit later about what you're doing with Diabetes Sports Project, some of the athletes that are affiliated with you and working with you to increase the visibility and also to drive that mission home. So it's clear that you were a very, very active kid. You were a very, very active young adult. This diagnosis kind of popped up on you unexpectedly, as it does for most of us. But then you took your athletics to a completely different level when you joined Team Type 1. Maybe you can kind of share just a little bit about what Team Type 1 is and really what motivated you to kind of jump on board with them.
Yeah, I was looking for other athletes. I think there was a real shortage of a network of Type 1 athletes. And at the time I was into the workforce and playing pickup soccer games here and there, and and my boss at the time, essentially as a wedding gift, got me a entry into half Ironman. So it was sort of a jump in the deep end, and I really didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about triathlon. I had never really run marathons or anything to that extent. My running always involved, kicking a little white ball around. But I was connected because I moved down to Atlanta. I was connected with Joe Eldridge and Phil Sutherland, and got connected with Team Type 1, and we took part in. Essentially, I came on board when we were doing the Run Across America. So 10 athletes all with type 1, ran essentially, it was just under a marathon a day for 15 days. We went from San Diego, California to New York City, ending on World Diabetes Day. And it was basically a 24-hour relay. So there was always somebody out running. And I think we averaged about, I think it was about 24 plus miles per day for the 15 days. And, obviously an incredible experience and sort of an extreme example of, what's possible with type 1. I think, we literally ran across the country and it sort of just snowballed from there. So a couple of years later, I did my first Ironman triathlon, which is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and then a marathon. And went on to do a couple of those and a handful of half Ironmans and marathons and sort of any opportunity that I get to use sports as a tool, I certainly take advantage of.
So any of the things that you described would be challenges for someone with or without diabetes, or with or without any sort of health-related issues. So what were some of the challenges that you personally faced out there, especially when you were doing that run across America? Because that is a significantly kind of it's an extreme type of an accomplishment there. So were there things that you experienced that were specific to diabetes versus the things that you would kind of experience whether or not you were facing type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, I think, it's always interesting when I speak with professional athletes now who don't have type 1, but are in the know, sort of understand what the disease is. And a great example is Craig Alexander, who's widely considered sort of the Michael Jordan of triathlon, 5-time world champion, stand-up guy. But I mean, he runs a 240 something marathon at the end of an Ironman, right? The guy's an incredible athlete. And we were doing we share a sponsor, and so we spent a couple of days together for a video shoot, and he, like other athletes that we've talked to, sort of are blown away because they understand from a purely athletic perspective how challenging any sporting event is, right? But especially endurance, because when you're talking about endurance activities, whether it's Run Across America or marathons or any of it, the nutrition component it's critical. It can make or break your day. And so to couple type 1 on top of that, I've taken the outlook of, what do I need to do athletically for my nutrition? What's sort of the optimal nutrition? And then I adjust my type 1 to fit that nutrition plan. Everyone's very unique and specialized in their own nutrition, but that's sort of been the way I've handled it. Mm-hmm. And, there's some fundamental changes that we know take place for almost everybody. It's very hard to put a stamp on this happens to every single type 1, but for the most part, as you're doing more and more endurance activities or prolonged exercise, you see a sort of steady drop in blood sugar, and with that can tend to come a need to reduce your insulin ratios, and how much reduction is very specific to each person and depends on the type of exercise, the weather, the altitude, the food intake, and there's a million factors that go into that equation. And so doing the Run Across America was a prime example of this, because we had 10 of us, all with type 1. I was probably the greenest runner in the sense that I had run one marathon, two marathons leading up to Run Across America that sort of summer. And so I was still very much figuring out, but many of the guys had run Boston and, were very, really accomplished. And so, it's pretty powerful when you get type 1s together in any environment, but to get a group together in a sporting environment, something like a marathon or a relay is really special, because everybody is sort of there for each other. So we didn't have an endocrinologist, we didn't have a doctor on board, probably should have, but we had each other, and we had, I had 9 other type 1s, type 1 minds, type 1 sort of knowledge bases of insights, and we have all sort of had, I think, what most people consider failures. I think of them as opportunities, opportunities to learn from, right? As opposed to, you didn't get it wrong, we didn't get it right? And I think it was Edison, right? He said, I figured out 10,000 ways not to do it and one way to do it, right? So I think realizing that every time maybe we end with a low blood sugar or high blood sugar, that's an opportunity to refine and just make minor adjustments. And the Run Across America was a prime example of that, because everybody did it a little bit differently. Some people were on pumps, some people were on pens, some people were on, CGMs, and for the most part, everybody had a similar reduction in how much insulin we needed, just because we were exercising so much, and our food intakes went up, even though we were, not having to require so much insulin. But it was quite an adventure.
Yeah, so you guys, there's power in numbers, there's no doubt. And that's kind of a little mesh computer that you had there with all the data points that you were collecting and helping each other just get across and fulfill the task. It's amazing to hear that. You touched a little bit upon metrics, and as you said, most endurance athletes in general, are using different types of metrics to kind of figure out where they are, where they need to be, whether it's heart rate or oxygen saturation. Some have subjective measures like sleep quality and just how we're feeling on that day, right? Did you or do you use continuous glucose monitor when you're training running, and how helpful has that been to you?
CGMs, continuous glucose monitors, in my mind, it's the most valuable tool in all of diabetes management. I think I've been on a Dexcom for, 9 years now, I guess. As soon as I could get on it, I did. And that was even before I knew the power of it as much as I do now. It takes a blood sugar reading essentially every 5 minutes. And to do that manually, obviously, is not going to happen. Before I would test my blood sugar as much as I could, 10, 15 times a day, because that number, that's your everything. And when I was first learning sort of how to live an active life with type 1, I would take my blood sugar, before any sort of exercise, gym, soccer game, whatever. I would take my blood sugar before, maybe an hour before, and then 15 minutes before, so I could see what that trend was. And then in the middle of it, I would stop and check. At the end of it, I would stop and check. 2 hours later, I would check again. So, because I wanted to see what that trend looked like, and if I would note what I had food wise, what my blood sugar was before and after, and again, sort of using that data to educate myself, because what works for you, what might not work for me, right? And I think everybody is so individual that we need to become sort of our own diabetes coaches, and I very much rely on what I refer to as my diabetes team, endocrinologists, CDEs, nurses, nutritionists, that team to sort of guide me. But CGMs and my Dexcom is, I've had a couple patches where I've been without it, just for insurance reasons or whatnot, or just error on my part to forget to order a new transmitter or whatever. But when I have been without it for a week or so at a time, I feel lost. I feel sort of blind. I don't have the confidence that I do otherwise. And obviously nothing's different. I'm still the same person. I still have the same background and history, but the comfort in knowing, you can see at any time what your blood sugar is. The trending arrow is, that's everything. And I think to know, obviously it doesn't prevent highs and lows, but you can act on them earlier. You can get ahead of them. The comfort in knowing you can sleep without having to wake up every night and check. For parents, I think it's massive, obviously, for a parent to be able to see real time what their kid's blood sugar is, whether they're sleeping, whether they're at school, preschool, wherever they are. That's huge. I think, in my mind, everybody coming out of a hospital who's diagnosed should have a CGM on. I hope, I pray that at some point we get to that, because it's so powerful, and I think it's also can be an education tool too. You literally sit there if you didn't have anything to do all day, and you could watch your blood sugar and see, I just had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and this is what happened, and it's pretty powerful. So to see what they're doing in that space is fantastic. Now it goes to watches, and it goes to, I send it to my doctor and my wife, and they can see real time too. I can't say enough good things about it. And I think it's the one thing that I don't go a day without. I've been on different pumps. I've been on pens, and I think insulin delivery is very specific and it's very individual. And I think it works differently for everybody in terms of their preferences, but in my mind, CGM technologies is the way to go.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's definitely changed the mindset of someone who, as you said, whether it's a parent or if you're the individual who's managing the day-to-day, it's a complete game changer in terms of comfort level. But it also helps you change mindset a little bit because it helps you take a look at what you're putting in your body and then ultimately what you need to do to make sure that you're staying within range and staying healthy. So I want to talk a little bit about that mindset. It's definitely key when you're competing, there's no doubt. And as we've talked about a lot throughout the podcast, you have a very competitive mindset that was injected in you, no pun intended with the diabetes reference there, but it was injected in you at a very early age. And, we work hard to push through that additional layer of type 1 when we're training or competing. It still has to be in the back of your mind, though, all the time, I would guess, even if you have the CGM and even if you have your data that's trending right there. So what have you done to strengthen the mental game, not only to handle those expected challenges that pretty much every athlete would experience, but also the day-to-day challenges that type 1 might throw at you?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it comes from practice. I now know that whether I'm stepping into a meeting, a sales meeting for work, or if I'm heading out for a 45-minute run, I know exactly, I can take a look at my CGM, I can see what my blood sugars are doing, where they're headed, if I need to make any corrections with insulin or with sugar. And I know that if I'm exercising, I'm going to need, I bring a gel pack, and I know that in about 35 to 40 minutes, I'll have that. I have a backup, and so I always have the one I plan to use, and then a backup wherever I am. I even put, the goo packs are so thin, I just put them in my, my suit pocket if I'm at work, and it's always a good conversation piece. But I think it comes from that sort of the practice and the confidence that comes from that, knowing that even if I have a horrible low or horrible high, I've been there. I know what to do, and we have the technologies. We've got insulin. We've got CGM. So I think it's about sort of preparing yourself for every opportunity, every possibility, and it's keeping sugar. I've got gel packs in my car. I've got them at my desk. I've got them in my travel bags. I've got them in my backpack. I've got them in my gym bags. I got them in my bedside table. So, there shouldn't be any reason. Granted, we all have those experiences where you forget something, it falls out of your pocket, whatever it might be. But I think the preparation and practice can go a long way in sort of setting you up for success and for not letting type 1 sort of interfere.
No doubt. Thank you for sharing that. So I'd like to shift gears just a little bit and talk a bit about Diabetes Sports Project. Now, for those who are listening who might not be familiar with the organization, what was the driving force behind the creation of it? You talked a little bit about that before, but maybe we can elaborate a little more. And the mission right now, kind of as you go into the next stage, it's a fairly young organization, but what are you looking to accomplish in the future?
Yeah, it is. It's young in the sense that we officially launched October 2015. So, a year and a half ago. It's not young in the sense that I've been in this sort of space as a type 1, athlete ambassador for, years. My co-founder, Casey Bourne, he's been doing this for years as well. He's run 14 Ironmans and Ironman World Championships, and many of we started with 11 sort of original athletes, and everybody has, and as we've grown, it's continued to be true, and everybody has the mindset of our athletic accomplishments are exciting and they're powerful and they're very special. But if we're not using them as a tool, as a platform to go out in the community and do good, the way we look at it is sort of we're missing it, right? We're missing sort of the purpose and the power and the potential of what those could be used for. And so we have a sense of almost a sense of responsibility. We feel that we need to be using these as a tool to go speak at children's hospitals, diabetes camps, support groups, anywhere we can, anywhere that a voice is needed, and a role model, an ambassador, an ear, a shoulder, whatever it is needed. We want to be there. And for a lot of us, we came from various backgrounds, other organizations where we saw, things, and we wanted to be out in the community as much as possible. And essentially, we weren't all able to do so in the manner we wanted to, and we sort of just made the decision that the industry needed Diabetes Sports Project. And within the first week or two, the response we received in the community was so overwhelming. I mean, it was a nice confirmation that what we were doing was appreciated and needed. I think we heard from, I remember day 4 or 5 after we officially launched, I got an email from Turkey, India, Australia, and the UK, all in one day.
Remarkable.
Right. And we don't have, we didn't have a marketing team. We just, a bunch of type 1s who we also have full-time jobs and families, and we're training, and we don't take a salary. All the money we raise goes towards creating team philanthropic events and community outreach events. And I think we're now over 70 athletes around the world, and we've got requests coming in every day, every week we have a few, and I talked about earlier, being part of a team is so powerful, and I think for everybody involved, right? The people who are now in the DSP family have a sense of team, have a sense of camaraderie, even though might be literally across the world from each other. We still have that bond and part of something bigger than ourselves, and it's something that we're extremely proud of, and the people we brought on board all have the same mindset of not letting type 1 stand in the way, having a positive attitude about it. Yes, we have challenges, we have setbacks, but together we can lean on each other and build something really powerful. So I couldn't be more proud of the athletes we have around the world. We've got Sebastian, who climbed Mount Everest. We've got a stand-up paddleboard world champion, Fiona, and we've got a young 10-year-old gymnast. We've got a business executive who also runs half marathons, and we've got professional athletes. We've got yoga instructors. We've got strong men. I mean, you name it. We've got this whole spectrum of amazing athletes, and the goal is that we have everybody in the community. There should be somebody on our website that hopefully they relate to, and if not, we'll keep expanding, right? Because they might not care that I've raced Ironmans, or that Seb climbed Everest, or Matt's a Division I football player and quarterback. So we need to make sure that everybody out there who needs a role model, who needs a point of inspiration, has somebody. And so it's sort of a perfect combination, because the community wins, we win, we get these amazing stories to promote and share, and so then it's that combination of both the inspiration, saying look at what they're doing, and then the other side of it, the education. And this is, I think, where the sense of responsibility comes in, because we have this tremendous knowledge base of type 1 in sports, type 1 in exercise, and if we sit on this knowledge base and these experiences and we don't share them, what good is that, right? And I think we want to be accessible. We give emails out and phone numbers out to everybody and say, any questions, please reach out. And if you want training, we can do that. If you want type 1 advice on top of training, we can do that. And it's really about being a resource for the type 1 community.
What I think is awesome also, if and I would encourage everyone who's listening to actually visit the website, because you're taking that step from, yes, being inspirational, and you have all these amazing athletes, varied backgrounds, varying ages, across the board, but what you're doing is you're starting to actually help people prepare for their own journey with exercise. And what I've noticed, and I would encourage everyone to take a look on your website, what you have on there is in the resources section. I believe it's a great checklist for anyone who might have diabetes, who might be starting an exercise program or a training plan, and that's kind of a first step. Aside from that, what kind of advice would you give someone who might be type 1, might be type 2, might not have diabetes whatsoever, who's really starting to think about, they're in that contemplation stage where they're like, well, you know what, I really need to start living a healthier life for one reason or another. How do we help them flip the switch to actually taking that first step?
Yeah, the first step's always hard, right? And I always hear people say, oh, I only did a 5K, I only did this, or I only did that. And I'm, you know what? The fact that you signed up for it and had the courage to sign up and commit to something, that's more than most people, right? So it doesn't matter what the distance is. It doesn't matter if it's whatever it is, right? That first step of picking an event, putting it on the calendar, you got a date circled, whether it's a week out or a year out or 6 months out. That first step of saying, I'm gonna commit to this and I'm gonna do it. I think that's the first step.
There's something very scary about that, though, right?
It is, right? You're putting it out there, right? You're putting it, and especially, now with social media, right? If you really want to commit to something, post it on Facebook, post it on Instagram, right? And announce it to the world. Why not, right? I think there's a real power in sense of accountability that a team and whether it be training partners or coaches or friends can have. And I think if having people to train with, whether it's swimming or any sport for that matter, right? I think swimming is a prime example because swimming can be a pretty lonely training thing if you're doing it by yourself. So I love going to a group master swim and knowing that there's going to be 50 other people there. And if I'm not there, I might get a text, hey, well, why'd you miss training? But I think that finding people you can do an event with and train with, whether it's virtually or literally meeting, at 6 a.m. before work to knock out a run, doing it together, I think is a pretty powerful and an effective way to stay on track. And by the end of it, it's again something we aim to do, but creating these training plans so that you do it well. And if you do it right, you get to the starting line, excited and ready and prepared. You're going to have a great day. You're also going to avoid injury. And I think for people with type 1, I think it's even more important that we train properly. Not, if you're talking about a marathon, you don't want to build up your mileage too fast week over week. And there's methods to that madness. And that's something that we're really excited to be doing too. And we've got some fun events coming up.
That's awesome. And yeah, the little successes build on one another, and ultimately the successes get bigger and bigger. And then after a while, you don't even realize where you came from necessarily because you're so far down the path and you're doing things that you never thought you were capable of.
And you hit on a brilliant point there. And it's something that I share with a lot of kids too. I equate diabetes management a lot to Ironman training or marathon training, right? It's this long process. Obviously, type 1 is never ending, but when you're training for, let's say, an Ironman, you don't wait until race day to have sort of what I call little victories. If it's a Tuesday morning run that you've been struggling to hold a pace at, or go do certain hill sprints, and that it might be 8 months out from the race, but if you have a success there, you need to celebrate it, right? Because it's those little victories all the way along that are going to keep you motivated, keep you excited, and have that end event be successful. And I look at type 1 the same sort of way. I don't wait until my A1C checkup at 3 months to define whether or not I had good management. sometimes for me, the can be a tough one for me in the mornings. My blood sugar always rises. My insulin ratios change in the morning. I have to typically take more with breakfast or take it further out. And so if I wake up with a good blood sugar, I celebrate that because it's something that I'm working on and trying to, continue to refine and get better. Or if it's a, post-exercise low or high blood sugar that people can struggle with, and you get it right, you end at whatever number is perfect for you, celebrate that, because type 1 is not an easy thing for us to manage, and I don't think we give ourselves enough pats on the back for what we do. So I did a race on Sunday and with a bunch of type 1s, and every kid I ran by I gave a pat on the back, but I think it's a very literal meaning that we need to do more of, because to do what we do is, I know I'm a little biased, but I think it's pretty remarkable.
It is pretty remarkable, and I'm actually listening and watching you kind of as you lit up when you were talking about the kids, and I think that's the core, based on what I'm interpreting. What you're saying is the core of your mindset is the little victory all the time, is looking for the little victory. And I think it's so true. It could be the 5-minute mark on your Dexcom. It could be the 20-mile mark in the marathon. It's the little victories that really matter. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So here's something funny that I came across, and this is the power of social media. I understand that you had to shave your head this past week, and I'm really curious. The caption said something to the effect that you lost a bet. So I'm really curious to understand the bet, if you'd like to share that, and ultimately how you felt about shaving your head.
Yeah. Well, I'm the butt of a lot of jokes internally within the team, whether it be my hair or whatever it is. But I told some of the team that if we were trying to raise some money to be able to host, this past weekend, we went and did a big sort of diabetes weekend up in Seattle. We spent there was a 8K race on Sunday. There was the JDRF Nordstrom Beat the Bridge 35th year they've done it. They raised $2.2 million. It's 9,000 people. It's really amazing event, and we wanted to go and be a part of it. So we took part of Saturday and spent it at Seattle Children's Hospital, and then Saturday evening we brought together the Type 1 community and had a sort of dinner gathering at the house that we had rented. And so the two events were amazing. The Children's Hospital, I mean, it's powerful, and we come away as inspired as hopefully we inspire those. But I told the team that if we hit a certain fundraising goal and we're able to host the dinner and the weekend, that I would do something, and sort of put it out to the team, said, you name it, I'll do it. And they quickly said, shave your head. And so I did. So I split my head open a few times in my soccer days and whatnot. So those scars are showing through.
That's all good. That's a great story. So we're going to wrap it up here in just a couple of minutes or so. A couple of things that I just wanted to, if some information I wanted to get from you. If anybody wanted to connect with you or Diabetes Sports Project, where would be the best place for them to do that?
We're on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our website is diabetessportsproject.org. So I think we've got contacts on all those platforms and on our website. So whatever's the easiest way.
That's awesome. Okay, so make sure to check out Eric and Diabetes Sports Project online. Eric, look, the story that you continue to write is nothing less than remarkable. And I'd like to thank you from my perspective, and also for all the other people that you're helping out there, for the inspiration and the positivity that you're putting out into the world. It's definitely much needed. The work you're doing on behalf of those with diabetes is greatly appreciated. And I really look forward to seeing the generations of DSP athletes who are confidently competing on that world stage, following your lead as they show the world what's really possible with diabetes. So thank you very much for all that you do, and however I can support your mission, I'm always happy to step up and help you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And it's, one last thing. I mean, you hit on this sort of next generation, right? And that's been one of the coolest things for me. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. But some of our young athletes, we've got a kid out of Florida, Luke, who won a national championship for triathlon. And, he's going to be sitting in this chair pretty soon, if not, next week. And it's really powerful to see this young generation stepping into this sort of diabetes role models and diabetes ambassadors, and it's a powerful thing, man, and it's really it's just exciting to see. So lots of really fun stuff ahead.
No doubt, no doubt. Again, so if you guys are interested in learning more about Eric as well as the work he's doing with Diabetes Sports Project, you can visit diabetessportsproject.com for all the details. You can also catch up with Eric on social media channels as well, all over online. There's a bunch of videos with Eric as well. And thanks for listening. Be sure to visit our website, thebravestlife.com/002 for show notes on today's show and for more information regarding Eric and Diabetes Sports Project. Also, if you're into what we're doing here, please spread the love by sharing that link, about the Diabetes Sports Project, thebravestlife.com/002 with someone that you know. That was great. Did you have fun, Eric?
Thank you so much for having me.